Okay, welcome on this beautiful day to the January 22nd, 2026 City of Grand Rapids Planning Commission meeting. We have a couple public hearings today, but before we get into that, I'll just go briefly through our procedures. So when we start a case, we'll have staff presentation, and they'll go through the details of the case, and then the applicant will be able to come up and provide additional information for us. We'll then open the public comment. If anyone here is from the public wants to comment on a case, they can approach the microphone, tell us your name, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to give the Planning Commission your comments. Then when we close public comment, the applicant can address any comments that came, and then we'll have deliberation and a decision here on the dais. As a reminder, we are, this meeting's being streamed live on Facebook and YouTube. And also we do have staff prepares draft resolutions with language both for and against findings. So if you see us reading when a motion's being made, we are, but those are just draft for us to use as however we like and to modify also based on the case before us. And with that, I will go back to our agenda and we'll do conflict of interest. Any conflicts of interest today?
I at least want to disclose that I have done work with Amplify GR. It wasn't particularly on the development of the site in question, but I have done neighborhood engagement.
Just move it closer.
Did everybody hear that, or should I re-say it? Restate it? Okay, I do want to disclose that I've done work with Amplify GR in the past. I don't have any current contracts with Amplify, but the work has been primarily neighborhood engagement and data analysis, land use analysis for surrounding areas and not for the property in question.
So no financial ties or anything to this project?
No.
I also, as Habitat for Humanity is involved in this project, I serve on that board, so no financial ties, but I think in the past we've decided that is enough to elicit a conflict.
Yep. Okay, let's do a motion first for Commissioner Hendrick. Do we have?
Make a motion that Commissioner Hendrick does not have a conflict of interest on this case.
Okay.
Support?
Okay, a motion support, further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And then let's make a determination on Commissioner Yonkers. We have in the past, so it seems to remain consistent.
You're saying in the past we've determined that he's had a conflict?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, because he's, as a board member of Habitat, interested in the financial success of that organization.
I would make a motion that Commissioner Yonker has a conflict of interest.
Okay.
Support.
All right, motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, let's get into our first case, 1319 South Division.
All right, I'd like to give a little background history for this one. So the site has a long history of being a auto-related, having auto-related use on the property. As you can see, there's a Westgate sign here. It was originally developed in 1934 as a drive-in oil and service station, known as Westgate Station. And over the years, there were several approvals granted. The first one being a variance in 1961 that allowed for this existing two-story brick building to be located at the rear property line and 5 feet from the north property line, as well as another approval in 1967 for the second-story addition. At that time, it was an office space that was accessory to the service station. In 2001, the underground storage tanks were removed and the property was sold in 2006. And since that time, the service station signage shown here has been removed, and the required licenses were not maintained. And so as a result, the vehicle service use was deemed abandoned and has been for quite some time. And that is why the applicant is before you today to request approval to establish a vehicle service and repair facility at this property at 1319 South Division Avenue. I'd additionally just like to note that the second story that was the office use has been converted at some point to a 2-bedroom residential unit without building permits. And while this unit is currently certified and has been since February of 2024, some building code upgrades may be required relative to fire separation between that residential unit and the commercial unit below. The subject property is located in the South Division Corridor Plan, and it is designated, as you can see in this square here, as traditional business area. And it is located, as you can see in this image, just south of Focus Area 3 and just north of Focus Area 4. Nonetheless, Focus Area 3 notes that a large number of potential medium to small redevelopment sites are auto repair services and tire shops within the neighborhood, and residents have mentioned that on several occasions that the presence of these neighborhoods may be holding the neighborhood back, and as the corridor transforms over time, many of these auto businesses may transition out of the area to allow for a higher and better use of these properties within the neighborhood. Within Focus Area 4, you can see it has this blue shading here, and this is the subject property. It is identified as a potential redevelopment site. Kind of hard to see, but it says small developer opportunity, and it calls it out as a live-work flex space. The subject property is located in and surrounded by the TN-TBA zone district to the north, east, and south, and the TN-MDR zone district to the west. The property owner and applicant before you today also owns these 2 vacant parcels to the north. AC Sewing is to the east and has been before the Planning Commission before, so it might look familiar. And then Cortez Garage is a similar auto repair use just to the south here. And then again, residential properties to the west. The subject property is just over a 1/4 acre in size. And as you can see, a majority of the site is paved, and there are portions in disrepair. And this is likely due to those auto repair fueling pumps being removed, as I stated in 2001. There are 3 curb cuts that provide access to the site, with these 2 off of South Division and 1 off of LaBelle. And there are currently 4 non-conforming pole signs, or pole lights, excuse me, that will need to be replaced with fixed sharp cutoff features. As stated, the variance in 1961 approved for this building, and it still remains today on site. And as you can see, there is 1 vehicle service door, and the applicant is proposing to keep that one and replace the pedestrian door with a new service bay, so there will be 2 on that east facade facing South Division. This pedestrian door will remain, and the other one will be removed, and brick will fill in to match the rest of the facade. On the south facade, facing LaBelle, there are these pedestrian doors as well that provide access to the 2nd-story residential use above. There is also a retaining wall and chain link fence with barbed wire located along that west property line abutting a residential property. This is proposed to be removed and a new 10-foot wide landscape buffer will be replaced in that area abutting the residential property, as well as a new 10-foot wide landscape buffer along South Division for those parking areas. In terms of operation, the applicant is proposing to operate between Monday and Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. The business will have one employee and is anticipated to work on an average of 5 cars per day. For vehicle service and repair uses, they are subject to additional criteria of the zoning ordinance, and the Planning Commission has authority to waive and modify some of these requirements. So the first one, a minimum 1 acre lot size is required. As previously stated, this property is just above a 1/4 acre in size. So the Planning Commission may wish to consider whether a waiver is appropriate for this size and whether the site can reasonably accommodate the use as proposed before you today. Another standard is the service bay openings shall be oriented away from public streets and residential areas. As shown, one bay currently exists and faces South Division, and a secondary one is proposed. The one that is currently there is a legal non-conforming condition, but you should consider whether the second one is also appropriate. And in addition, the ordinance also requires that all repair activity, vehicle storage, and part storage, such as tires, should occur entirely within the building, and that vehicles should only be stored on the site temporarily for the purpose of repair, and definitely not within the public right-of-way. Relative to parking, typically front yard parking is prohibited in the TNTBA zone district. And this site has historically included this front yard parking as part of the service station layout, and staff has found that this arrangement may continue. And so based off of the mix of uses of residential and the vehicle repair use, 9 spaces is required and only 8 is provided on the site plan before you, so there's a 1 space deficit. The Planning Commission may wish to consider a reduction based on on-street parking and nearby transit. Staff just recommends that there's careful consideration in whether the site can adequately handle both the residential parking demand and the temporary vehicle storage associated with the vehicle repair on the same site. Staff has received 2 letters expressing concerns about the presence of other vehicle service facilities within this neighborhood and how these businesses are negatively impacting nearby residents. And overall, the Planning Commission should consider the following: whether the proposed use aligns with the purpose and intent of the TN or the traditional business area designation found in the South Division Corridor Plan relative to auto repair shops, as well as whether the vehicle service and repair facility use meets the purpose and intent of the TNTBA zone district, reinforcing a pedestrian and transit-friendly environment in a mixed-use area. Thirdly, whether the site can meet service, vehicle service, and parking standards given the existing site conditions, operation, and that the property is less than 1 acre in size. The potential impacts of a vehicle service facility coexisting with the residential use on the same property. The potential impacts of this use on adjacent residential uses, and lastly, any additional neighborhood concerns that will be raised in the public hearing. Are there any questions for me before turning over to the applicant?
With the parking requirements, can you just remind me, is there something specific in the ordinance about double stacking, particularly with the auto repair facilities? They wouldn't be allowed to double stack cars here, right, in the parking lot?
Tandem parking, I think, is how the ordinance refers to it, and no, it's not permitted.
Okay.
Related, I feel like on this plan that's on our screen, there are 9 spaces shown.
Are you counting this one?
I am.
Okay. I don't believe that one is a space.
Okay.
This
Too close
curb cut will need to be,
Okay. Gotcha.
it's too wide to meet current city standards. So once it's reduced, that space will likely be removed off the plan.
Okay.
Any other questions for Avery? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll have the applicant come up and share anything else you'd like with us.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Alex Smart. It's good to see a couple friendly faces on the panel. My friend or client Facundo reached out to me a while back when he purchased this property under the understanding and assumption that it was okay to put his business there. So he reached out to me. I'm an architect, a local architect, and asked for my help. So I'm trying to navigate through the process. I've been working with Laura and her team, fantastic. They're giving us great advice. And it was very well said and detailed, the process that we've gone through and the description. I wanted to add regarding the parking is this existing drive is going to be blocked, and I was told that we need to remove all that. But it does give us the opportunity to extend the landscaping a little bit further and gain a couple more parking spaces, if that's okay with the city, of course. So we will be working, if approved, of course, with the city to make sure that we meet all those requirements. There was also a comment about, mention about fire separation, and it has been our intent, I talked with Facundo, that the fact that if this is approved, we will have to provide the necessary separation, rated construction, between the auto repair and the apartment up above. But I think everything else was said. If you have any questions, we're here to provide all the answers if we can.
Thank you very much. I do just have one question. So I'm wondering if there was engagement with the nearby neighbors related to this land use?
So Facundo is telling me that he did have conversations with the immediate neighbors, the ones behind, and I believe across the street.
Okay, thank you. And go ahead.
Your client's not currently operating a repair facility in this vicinity right now?
No, it's the area down below is vacant. He does own a repair shop on 1300 Alpine, and that's the one that he's going to be relocating here if it's approved and we can continue forward.
What was the motivation to move? I'm curious.
I'll ask him.
¿Por qué? Porque la razón, bueno, si quiere, lo puedo decir ahí.
Oh, he's going to tell you.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Facundo Lucas Diaz, and I'm trying to move this place because the previous owner, she told me that's certified for auto repair shop. But the reason is I come into the city to get the permission and everything, and they told me it's not right. So that's why I come here. And I want to move it from to the South Division because they're Alpine, 1300 Alpine. I've been operating right now, but the space, it's too little. And I'm checking out there, so I have a risk when I have a car. Every customer comes in the shop. When I finish the service, they have to reverse to leave. So it's not safety. So in this space, it's more safety for me because I have more space. And the other thing is, I'm paying $4,000 for this property just for nothing. And I'm paying $3,500 and $1,300 Alpine for using that property because I'm renting. So, and this is the reason I want to move in this property. But I want to straight everything with the city, with the neighborhood and everything good, because that's what I'm thinking, to make sure everything fine, and that's the reason.
That makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. I'm familiar with your business on Alpine. I drive by it almost every day, so I can understand why that might be too tight. And yeah, there's no good place to park where you can turn around and get out onto the street easily. So I understand that. But at that site on Alpine, oftentimes you'll have more than 9 cars there, even on a smaller site. So that's why I asked the question about double parking cars or having them parked too deep, and if you would be able to commit to only having cars parked one in each space at the new site, because that would be a concern.
Okay, eso está diciendo por los parqueaderos que.
Puedes prometer de que nada más vas a estacionar un solo carro y no poner dos uno atrás de otro.
Oh, sí, sí, no. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to don't double stack the cars, the parking. That's what I'm trying to get this space.
Okay. So you would be able to commit to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Any additional questions? Go ahead.
Sorry. I do have a question about the curb cuts off of Division. The plan that we have in front of us shows 3 existing curb cuts, and the plan shows that you're going to take away one of those curb cuts, but are you saying that you want to actually close down 2 of those curb cuts so you would access the site from the north curb cut, and then you could exit onto LaBelle to the south?
No, the proposal is to close one.
Okay.
And then the curb cut to the south, right here by LaBelle, is a little bit too large. And I received notice from the plan review that we will have to right-size that one access drive. So we're prepared to do that and redesign that access to meet city ordinance codes.
Understood. Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. You can have a seat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will open up the public hearing. If you are here on this case, come forward and give us your thoughts in 3 minutes or less. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Okay, commissioners, thoughts?
I don't want to put city staff on the spot, but are we able to calculate roughly how many additional spots we might be able to yield by extending the landscaping further to the south? Is it to the south?
To the north.
Sorry.
We could probably calculate that. Let me see.
2, maybe 3.
I was going to estimate 3, but it's a little difficult on the map, but I would say 3 would be a safe number, I think, to allow for 3 additional spots if that southern curb cut shown on the plan or the middle one that exists today were removed. I think 3 would be a safe number, if not 4.
Are you saying 3 additional to the north along Division, but they would lose that one at the bottom, right?
Yes.
So net gain of 2?
Approximately of what's shown on the plan, yes.
But I think that the one at the bottom wasn't counted initially, so it shows 9 if you count that, but 8 was what was in the staff report.
Got it. So it would be a true gain of 3 then?
I struggle because I want to approve this to help with the safety and with its concerns to the other business, but I also look at where the master plan is and the concern with from the neighbors about the amount of auto repair businesses around there and the concerns about that holding back the area. So I'm struggling between those two things.
I have those same concerns, but I also, the business or the property as currently laid out, clearly this was the intended use, and the applicant's already purchased the property, which makes me struggle more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would encourage the Planning Commission to stay focused on the built environment piece of things. While clearly there's a challenge contractually and such, I can appreciate the challenge of how what's being recommended as part of the community master plan, but also balancing that with the built environment and specifically how this site is situated and constructed here.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's interesting about the master plan. I was thinking about that as well. I also think, the site has, been definitely underutilized for, a dozen or more years. So I appreciate a new business or a business continuing to stay in the city of Grand Rapids. I think the parking situation is a little bit challenging because there's a ton of pervious surface there. There's room for a lot more vehicles, right? And so whether or not we end up with a lot more vehicles on that site, whether it goes to the north, I don't know that, I don't know what will prohibit the applicant from parking vehicles on those vacant lots or on the north side of this property, which, maybe is neither here nor there. Car repair folks have a lot of vehicles on the sites, and that's just how it goes, I guess, as long as they can stay out of the right of way. I don't know what else we do about that, but it is a lot of pervious surface on that for 9 or 11 spots or however it ends up being. But overall, I think glad to see a site here like this, become active again. I think maybe not fitting in the ideal box of the master plan, but I do think it's good for the community and for that neighborhood to have activity at that site. And
I'm in the same place. I'm encouraged to see the site improved. My struggle has been this use is what was previously existing here, so it does feel like a natural evolution to re-energize the site in the same way, and I'm motivated to approve it for that reason.
Yeah, I would say some of the benefits is that it is using an underutilized site. It's bringing it closer to compliance by increasing the landscaping and removing an existing barbed wire fence that's obviously not good for the neighborhood. Those are all huge benefits. I do have fears about operations of the site, the scope creep of stored cars. I don't know if we can make the condition that it could be approved if an additional curb cut was closed and landscaping was extended to the north on Division. I would feel a lot more comfortable if we could get those extra parking spaces. I know right now the site that they're on is a tenth of an acre, and this is at least a quarter acre. So I think some of the issues that they're having there would be decreased. They're still operating in the city. That's a site that's 2.5 times the existing site. There's some benefits to approval. I think that we could do that. I would feel comfortable with some conditions. Oh, he has thoughts.
Well, I think if I'm understanding this right, they're already suggesting that they're closing one curb cut, which I don't think we're asking them to do another. Right? As drawn, there's 3, they're closing one and narrowing another. This is not a curb cut. It's just, it looks like curb right of way right now. So this will, the extension of the landscaping to the north up to the existing and future curb cut is what has been recommended. And by conditioning for the additional parking spaces, then we don't even need the parking waiver, right? 9 are required, and that would make 11. So I think in that way it works. I do have, I mean, I'm conflicted on the number of auto repair shops in the area, and I understand the concerns of the neighbors. But hopefully by, the applicant coming in, looking to do the right thing, making commitments to use the space as described, I think it's an improvement for this property and hopefully a good thing for the neighborhood. So I'm inclined to support with those conditions.
Yeah, I'm super conflicted about this one. I really appreciate the site plan, bringing it closer to conformance with the ordinance with green space and landscaping. But I think my big hang-up is that both the ASP and the master plan are suggesting, based on community input, a transition of this area into something other than auto-oriented uses. And so having this before us does present an opportunity to nudge it in that direction and to follow through with some of the recommendations from those planning documents. But I understand where all of y'all are coming from, and you get to make the motions, so.
May I add something that the client just told me?
You may.
So he's, I need to stop touching this. He just told me that he would be committed to providing an affidavit stating that he will not exceed the number of cars stored on site to meet the city and your requirements. So.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Any other discussion? Would someone like to make a motion?
Can I ask one more question about transparency
yeah.
on the site? It is an existing building, so it doesn't have to meet the transparency. They're changing the front facade. The transparency right now appears to only have a couple small windows that don't really, that are higher up on the building. Do we know the transparency requirements for this zone district? And how close to compliant it is?
We do. Laura, Avery, do you have some context on that discussion while I look it up about what was, I didn't know if you had already run those calculations. We didn't, because the building was established by variance, it was existing, and it doesn't meet the zoning ordinance requirements for the setbacks or for the transparency. So we didn't have that conversation because it was established by variance. And given the extent of the site upgrades that the applicant is proposing, compelling the applicant to increase the transparency on a building that was allowed by that variance approval didn't seem to be a priority discussion point. 60% is the requirement for that zone district, but I think Laura raises valid points about the zoning ordinance does have allowances for departures from that 60% based on the nature of the use, the placement of the building being towards the back, the existence of the building based on the variance. Our staff direction was to remain focused on the site improvements versus the building element requirements. If the Planning Commission finds it necessary to add additional transparency, that's something that we could discuss with the applicant. There just might be some challenges, especially as it relates to the extent of the improvements that may not warrant some additional compliance, but that would be up to the Planning Commission to consider.
Do the windows for the residential unit on the second floor contribute to that 60%?
They don't. So the 60% generally would be between 2 and 8 feet, so it's for the ground floor. So that would be the upper level transparency requirement, which I believe drops down to about 30%. Visually, it certainly appears that the second floor would sufficiently meet the ordinance.
I think the one other thing that was brought up during the report was adding a second service door on the front there. And if this gets approved, I don't have a problem with adding a second service door there, even though it is facing the street. I don't think the amount of changes that would be required to that building to make it come into compliance would be worth it for the owner.
This may not be relevant, so just tell me if we don't need an answer. I'm just curious if the building code speaks to the door going right into a bathroom, going into the service area. If that's an issue, like, does there need to be a customer entrance with this type of a business?
I don't feel equipped to answer that question.
There's a new door on the north side.
Okay.
Was that part of your discussion, Laura? Okay. So, but it sounds like a new door is being added as a customer entry. Okay.
And the door on the north side opens onto the applicant's property, not onto the neighbor's property? Okay.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Mulling over. Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Now therefore be it resolved, the Planning Commission approves the special land use and site plan review request of Lucas Auto Repair, Facundo Lucas, to establish a vehicle service and repair facility at 1319 South Division Avenue for the following reasons. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the purpose and intent of the master plan and zoning ordinance, including in the zone district, because the proposed use will support the purpose and intent of the TNTBA zone district by providing a mix of uses within a commercial area, and will allow for reasonable use of an underutilized property and bring the site closer to conformity with current regulations. 2, the proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of section 5.12.08E because the proposed use has been designed to meet all standards and requirements with modifications permitted by the zoning ordinance, and the site will be brought closer to conformity with current landscape standards. 3A, the proposed use will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the existing planned character and uses of the neighborhood adjacent properties because the original use of the subject property was auto-oriented in nature, and the proposed use is consistent with the original intent of the building and site improvements, and the adjacent residential use will be buffered from the site activity by a landscape buffer. 3B, the proposed use will not have potentially adverse effects on the neighborhood because all repair activities will be contained within the building, and effective landscape screening will be provided. 3C, the proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future uses or to the public welfare because excessive noise or glare is not anticipated, and any visual clutter will be mitigated by landscaping. 3D, the proposed use will not adversely affect the walkability of the neighborhood, impair pedestrian circulation patterns, disrupt the continuity of the urban street wall, or otherwise hinder the creation of a pedestrian-oriented environment because landscaping will be planted in front of the parking area near the sidewalk along Division Avenue, reestablishing the street wall. 5B, the proposed use will not be detrimental to the financial stability or economic welfare of the city because the use will not result in nuisances that require code enforcement actions. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to the project. Standard conditions set A approvals. 1, that the application and plans submitted by the applicant and signed, dated, and stamped by the planning director shall constitute the approved plans, except if plan elements do not meet ordinance requirements and or as amended in this resolution. 2, that the use shall operate according to the application and per testimony as recorded in the Planning Commission minutes. 3, that this approval does not include any proposed signs, and any future signs shall be subject to the requirements of Article 15 of the ordinance and permits received prior to installation. 4, that a land use development services permit, building permit, and all other required permits be obtained for the city of Grand Rapids prior to construction, demolition, or operation. 5, that any expansion of the approved special land use requires an additional special land use review and approval by the Planning Commission. 6, that the proposed use will comply with all other applicable city ordinances and policies and all state laws. 7, that this approval shall take effect 16 calendar days after the date of the Planning Commission's decision. 2, that all activities shall be performed within the building, and all equipment, vehicle parts, tires, and any other materials and supplies shall be located and stored within the building. 3, that damaged or wrecked vehicles shall not be stored on site for purposes other than repair. 4, that all vehicles awaiting repair or pickup by the vehicle owner shall be kept in approved parking spaces on site. 5, that to the extent practicable, the site shall meet the green site element standards of Article 6, green space and tree canopy, and that the parking lot landscape requirements of Article 11 and the parking lot landscape requirements of Article 11, screening, buffering, and interior landscaping. 6, that on-site lighting be brought into compliance with the standards of Section 5.2.19. 7, that the curb cut on LaBelle Street Southwest be narrowed to meet current engineering standards.
Did you want to add the condition about expanding that landscaping along South Division? I have a condition drafted if you'd like.
Yeah, I would actually. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead with that.
Oh, I've just lost it. That the landscaping along the South Division frontage be extended to the north to meet the existing curb cut, and that additional parking spaces be added.
Yep, that works. And we don't, like, condition 7 there was that the LaBelle curb cut is going to be narrowed. We don't need a similar condition that will eliminate that because that's shown on this plan. So we're assuming that's okay, right? Okay, thank you.
Support. And just a question on how do we calculate maximum parking allowed? There's a multiplier, right?
There's a multiplier. It's 20% over the maximum required.
Or the amount required?
I think that there is some flexibility to differentiate between the storage of vehicles that are being serviced and parking spaces for customers. So I feel comfortable with the nominal amount of parking that we can work with the number of spaces being proposed, plus a few additional with that logic.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking is, and I don't expect us to be able to determine this or design it right here, but if the applicant's architect was able to demonstrate that the drive lane width could allow for additional parking in front of the building, as the aerial shows, and I think it wasn't in our packet, but it was on the screen. So right there, in front of where no, I'm sorry. Can you go back to the photo? So it looks like cars have been parked, pulled up to the building to the left of where the service bays are proposed. And if the drive width there is wide enough to allow for 1 or 2 more parking spaces, if we're comfortable with that, I'm trying to create a scenario where they can stick to what they've committed to and not park cars where they're not supposed to be. So proactively saying that that would be okay if they can demonstrate that there's dimensions there. And again, my concern is their west side facility is tight. There are more than 9 cars parked there most times. So
then what I think I'm hearing you saying is that the applicant work with city staff to identify additional spaces for on-site storage of vehicles waiting for repair and/or recently completing a repair to ensure, orderly circulation of the site.
yeah, what I don't want to see a bunch of parallel parking and odds and ends, but if it makes sense in an orderly fashion, then I'm okay with that, and I'd like to try to permit that if everyone else is comfortable with it.
Yeah, I am. I do think that there's more opportunity to have, for lack of it, like structured, like planned parking on this site. And if we're, yeah, I mean, I think we see it a lot that car repair facilities often have more cars than they anticipate on the site at a given time. And if we had spaces for them, that's fine to fill them as long as they're, planned appropriately. So I would agree with that amendment.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion?
Repeat that at all, or was it sufficient?
So you're going to add another?
I was trying to type what I
Okay. Yeah,
stated
go ahead.
off the cuff and just wanted confirmation that, is that okay? That additional parking spaces be added where site dimensions allow to ensure orderly and efficient use of the site and accommodate necessary vehicle storage.
Yes? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Congratulations and good to see you. All right, let's go to our second case, 1150 Adams Street Southeast, and Laura will walk us through this. Yeah, sorry, I'll let Commissioner Yonker leave.
So our next case is a request to amend an approved planned redevelopment district, or PRD. This PRD is part of a larger development plan known for the Boston Square Business District, known as Boston Square Together. The PRD was adopted by the City Commission in August of 2020. The property is located east of Kalamazoo Avenue, bounded by Adams Street to the north and Fuller Avenue to the east. Surrounding property includes low-density residential to the north, traditional business area to the west and south, and mixed-density residential with the Grand Rapids Housing Commission directly to the east. So the larger development area, Boston Square Together, includes development that is not part of this PRD. In this image, you can see the building at the corner of Kalamazoo and Ramona is the Community Hub building that is part of the Boston Square Together development outside of the PRD. That building has been constructed. And in this image, you can see kind of in the middle of the screen, there's a building under construction that is part of the PRD, is currently under construction today, and I'll talk more about that building in a little bit. This is the plan, the conceptual site plan that was approved with the PRD ordinance. And it was intended that this would be the general plan of the overall development, and then each development phase would come back to the Planning Commission for site plan review with a public hearing to review the details of each individual development phase. As you can see, there's Evergreen Extension. The street would be extended. The Community Hub building is at the bottom of this image here. And the building that we saw under construction right now is this building in the middle labeled F2. And the F buildings are the family buildings, multiple, they're family residential and mixed use. There are senior buildings, those are labeled S1 and S2. And then the townhome buildings at the north along Adams Street are T1, T2, and T3. So in this original approval, there are 3 townhome development buildings and this play area that is located central to the development. And it's the townhome area of development that is requested to be amended today. Again, this is the original approval. This rendering shows how, the original development as it was approved would look like and feel like. If we focus in on the townhome buildings, you can see the T1 building was proposed to be 3 stories, and T2 and T3 would be 2 stories. There are some grades on this property, and these buildings were designed to take advantage of some of the grade changes to allow for garages, individual garages for each unit, to be accessed by the service drive running behind the townhomes. And as I mentioned, the PRD is intended to be developed, over time. Not everything would be constructed at once. The general development pattern would run from the south to the north. And this image, each number represents the intended order of development. And this F2 building is under construction today. And just south of that building is the F1 building. That building is currently under permit review. And so on this plan, you will see the townhomes are still intended to be, moving from south to north. They're intended to be last for development. So this is the site plan that is proposed that shows the changes. I've included this so you can see and review the overall PRD. We can come back to this slide if we need to later. But I also wanted to give you the opportunity to compare both plans side by side. So where there were 3 separate buildings fronting Adams Street, now there are 5 townhome buildings proposed to be oriented around the service drive entering the development area. 3 buildings would front Adams Street, and then 2 townhome buildings would be on the south side of that service drive. The play area that was previously centrally located on the property is now located at the northeast corner, fronting both Adams Street and Fuller Avenue. And the change in density is also being requested. 20 townhome units were approved originally. What's proposed on the new site plan are 22 townhome dwelling units with a range of 22 to 25 units. I'll allow the applicant to provide some additional information, and I'll go into this a little bit later as well. There's some flexibility because of the new design of the townhomes. There's some flexibility to add some additional living space. So the applicant has wanted to ask for this change, the range of density. With a PRD, any change in increase in density requires an amendment. So this range allows for some flexibility in the future. Here's some rendering images of what the townhomes are intended to look like. They will be flat roof, brick clad structures. The 2 images at the top of the screen are the buildings fronting Adams Street. As you can see in these images, they will be 2 stories at the street. Because of the grade change, they are actually 3-story buildings. You can see on the bottom left image, where the garages were originally proposed is now 0-step entry into the units. And then the buildings south of the service drive are 2-story. They don't have a basement or a lower level, and those are also designed to be 0-step entry. This slide shows the existing grades on the property. You can see that there's significant slope, or significant elevation change of about 15 feet, dipping down from Adams Street to the south, that runs straight through the middle of the property and of the development area. So this image, you can see the slope going down. The building that you can see in this image is the existing school building that's on the property today that will be demolished. And in the distance this is that F2 building that is currently under construction. And this is the view from Adams Street. So as I mentioned, the townhomes are arranged around this internal drive. Because the garages have been removed from the plan, there is now, parking has been added to this drive. There's parallel parking on the north side of the drive and 90-degree parking spaces at the south side of the drive, just west of the T5 building. Relative to parking, each area of development with the PRD is required to provide a parking calculation and any appropriate waivers or reductions to demonstrate that it meets its own parking demand. Previously, because garages were provided for each townhome unit, the parking requirement, 2 spaces per unit, was met with the garages. And the garages have now been removed, so parking on the street is required to meet that parking minimum. The range of units requested require 44 to 50 parking spaces, and 23 parking spaces are now provided on this internal drive. So that requires, we asked the Planning Commission to consider if a waiver or reduction of the required minimum parking is appropriate. It's a deficit of 21 to 27 parking spaces. And a reduction, when in considering a reduction, it's important to consider whether there's adequate street parking, the intensity of use, the existing or planned traffic patterns, and available transit in the area. And I've put details about the parking waivers and reductions in the staff report. So speaking about the drive, although the drive is in the same configuration and location as originally approved, the nature of the drive has changed. Previously, it was necessary for the residents to access their garages, and now it functioned more like an alley. Now it's more of a residential street with dwellings fronting on both sides. And even though the back of the townhome buildings fronting Adams Street is along that internal drive, there are entrances to those homes on that drive as well. So this is the change in the nature of the drive with the parking and the access to the residential dwellings does change the circulation pattern of the PRD in general. So I will also mention that on this plan you can see that there is a parking lot, surface parking lot behind the T5 and T4 buildings that is intended to provide parking for the other uses on the property. So here is the overlay of the existing grades with the proposed site plan, and with this this illustrates that the surface parking area west of the T5 building is downslope from those townhome buildings. And also, this shows that the significant slope from the level area of the park at the corner drops about 8 feet to the sidewalk next to the internal drive. And that's an important consideration, just the park area is necessary to meet the urban open space requirement for this development, and it's intended to provide a recreational space for the residents of the development, as well as the neighborhood surrounding it. And while the location of the park on the periphery of the development helps increase the accessibility and availability to neighboring residents, due to the slopes, it may hinder some of the accessibility for the residents of the development. Additionally, there are 6-foot wide sidewalks planned to be constructed on both sides of the internal drive, directly adjacent to the concrete curb and gutter. There is no parkway planned. While this approach is intended to be an efficient use of property of the development, it does not meet the requirements of the city's Vital Streets plan for a residential street. This slide I left in case questions come up. This is a cross-section of the elevation changes of the drive. I will defer to the civil engineer to provide details in describing this, but I wanted you to know that this was available if it were a discussion point. And now the elevations, you can see how these buildings have been designed to take advantage of the grade changes on the site. The east and the west elevation of the 3-story buildings, those are the buildings fronting Adams Street, and you can see that they are 2 stories at the street and then 3 stories along the internal drive. I will also mention on these 3-story buildings, because of the lower level, on the architectural plans, there are egress windows shown on the front of these buildings. There are no egress windows shown on the civil plans, and I will forward to the floor plans here. The lower level of those buildings is, as you can see on this floor plan, they're not planned to be built with livable space. So the zoning ordinance does require a 10-foot setback from the front property line for that egress window well. And so if those window wells are necessary, I'll defer to the applicant whether or not they're going to be included on the plan. They would need to meet that 10-foot setback. I do want to talk about the range of dwelling units and this lower level. It's our understanding that the additional dwelling units may fit within the existing building footprints on your plan in this lower level for future conversion. And it's that level that is the 0-step entry out onto the private drive or the internal drive. And so I will conclude with mention that the applicant engaged with 2 neighborhood meetings, and there's information in your packet, and they can provide additional details about those meetings should you have questions. So in sum, we're asking the Planning Commission to consider this revised site plan and increased density, and whether the additional dwelling units further the city's housing supply goals and supports the community master plan recommendations for a greater supply of housing types, and how the townhome buildings provide a transition from the lower density residential to the north and higher density and commercial uses to the south. Additionally, the site plan considerations, changes to the site plan, the location of the T4 and T5 buildings located central to the site, and relocation of the park to the periphery of the development. The treatment of the private drive, the sidewalks, and the parkway as well. And then finally, we ask the Planning Commission to consider the reduction in the parking requirements. Does anybody have questions for me?
Thank you, Laura. Any questions for Laura? I don't have any questions for you, but I'm wondering if we could get hear from Mobile GR related to the circulation and the discrepancy between street parking on Adams and the future plans of that as a neighborhood bikeway and their thoughts on that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. I like your sweater.
Thank you. It's very cozy for this cold, cold day. So, Ariana Jeske, Assistant Director for Mobile GR. Adam Street is designated a neighborhood bikeway in the Bike Action Plan from 2019. Currently, there is 30 feet of available width there, which is enough for 2 traffic lanes in the current parking lane. You can see that the residences to the north have a driveway, so they generally do not park on that side of the street. So if we were to build this into a neighborhood bikeway, we would be taking that parking. We do not have it as a current project, nor do we have it on the capital plan.
Okay.
We are moving forward with a new transportation plan, hopefully. I'll put that little asterisk on it. So it's something that we may not be keeping this particular type of bikeway or kind of bicycle facility within our newer plans. So in the immediate moment here, we are not planning on taking that parking. As far as the internal circulation of the driveway, it is kind of more of a residential road. If it is a private road, it is something that we are okay with, kind of like the parallel parking there. The 28 feet, unless it's being dictated by the fire, is wider than our standard driveway. And kind of, I would say that particular width would allow for 2 lanes and then a parking lane. So it's something that they would need to either sign or acknowledge that those would be inside parking spots. So.
Cool. Thank you so much. Any other questions from commissioners now? No. All right. We'll have the applicant come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is John Empel. I'm the Executive Director at Amplify GR, and Andrew with Habitat will also be speaking today. We're excited about this project and this revision to the plan. We began this planning process back in 2018, and it fully was adopted in 2020. And so you can probably imagine there's been a couple of things that have changed since that time, and likely in the future other things will be changing as well as we really try to get to a financeable, constructible for each of the subsequent phases. So. We've had a significant amount of community engagement over the last 6 to 9 months of this process. We've had 3 public meetings and a couple of smaller meetings as well. So we're pretty excited about the specifics of the site plan, and we're still working on the architecture design. So the design that you saw is very preliminary. We've actually been updating that since this. So it's significantly progressing to be beyond that. So the goal is that the final architecture would come back for review with the Planning Commission. I believe, is that right, Kristen? And so this is just kind of the initial part. Some of the things that we've really been focusing on, so net, this is a increase in density on the site. And so as we think about housing, certainly it's an important feature. Maybe one context point, for F2, the building that's currently under construction, there's 57 units, and we have not begun advertising for that yet. And we've already had an inquiry of over 450 people. And so I think it just speaks to the significant challenge that we have in terms of housing supply in the city of Grand Rapids. We've been really thoughtful about the transition between the single-family houses to the front and then really utilizing the grade change. So one of the big changes that we're proposing to make is the elimination of the garages. I think really the thought is we're creating the volume of space. Wouldn't it be better to use that for housing rather than for housing cars? And so that really is the big shift. And then if you think about this internal street, I think really the context is this is essentially the same width as a street in Easttown. And so it is thought of as more of kind of a driveway, if you will, but in terms of its context and width, it's very much like a traditional city width street in terms of its design. And really that's our goal. We want this to feel very European, walkable, despite the fact that it's more of an internal circulation space. The park, we really have grappled with what is the best way to approach this. So we've been very thoughtful about that. The topo is the existing topography, and so I would not focus too much on kind of that significant shift, because in the end, that's all going to be graded with retaining walls and that kind of stuff to really get the maximum flat space. And that's actually one of the main reasons we wanted to shift it. In the old or the original, that 15 feet of grade change was actually happening on the playground space, and so that's kind of one of the parts of why we wanted to shift that. The other part is, if you think about Cherry Park on the corner of Cherry and Eastern, I think this is a good kind of mental reference of what this could become. It's not going to be as large, but a prominent intersection, and how both the neighborhood can more enjoy the space versus it being internal to the Boston Square together. So that was the big shift of, is this for the neighborhood, for the community, or is this specific for the tenants of Boston Square together? So our conclusion, this should be for a greater amenity, and that's why we desire to kind of shift it to be a more public space. So I think that's probably it from the Amplify perspective. I think we're really excited about how this fits into the broader redevelopment effort. We actually have our second building under construction, so it's no longer in permit review. It's now under construction as of January 5. So the old Amplify offices, if you're familiar with those, is no longer there. It's now just a flat site, so we're pretty excited about that. And we're beginning to work both on the bank site on the top left or the northwest side of the corner, and the senior housing project. So a couple more that hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months will be coming back to the Planning Commission as well. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Andrew from Habitat.
Hi, everyone. Andrew Clardy, Vice President of Neighborhood Revitalization for Habitat Kent. I think John hit a lot of points that I was going to talk about, but I think it's important to keep in mind that these are all intended to be owner occupied. And so with that, the intention in the design is to allow for the longevity of a family to grow into the space and to be in their home for a long period of time. So the T4 and T5 buildings were added so that there is a component of accessibility to the site. That was the only way to include any sort of ADA accessible unit within the development, and that's something we try to achieve with every home that we build. And then the shift from the garages to the lower living space allows for families to grow, to build out that basement if they want to turn it into an ADU if they so choose. Just provides a lot of flexibility for a family to make choices for what works for them and what they need from their home, which I think is something that we're really excited about, just providing that flexibility and that growth opportunity through the design here. The other piece I'll talk about with the street design, it's really designed to be a community-oriented kind of community building space versus a parking lot. Every unit on the Adams Street units has an outdoor patio seating space on the back of that unit. We envision that really being the community center for these townhomes where you are able to interact with your neighbors. And so designing the street in a way where people feel comfortable sitting out there, talking, planting their gardens, grilling, whatever they want to do with that space, feels really important to us. And so we would appreciate keeping the street tight, slow, and really pedestrian oriented.
Great. I have one question. So I just wanted to clarify, I think something that Laura said during her presentation related to the unfinished portions of the buildings, that being where the zero step entry is, so will there actually be zero entry units?
Yes.
Okay.
So those, the 15 units on Adams will have the zero step entry on the backside. Our intention is to build those out as like a finished basement rec room kind of at the completion of our portion. And then the T4 and T5 on the other side of the street, those will be zero step entry with full accessibility. So first floor bathroom, first floor bedroom.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for that? Yeah.
I guess could you just address the discrepancy with the egress windows and whether or not that was?
Sure, yeah. So I guess our intention was to include the egress windows, which is part of providing the flexibility for a family to make that into a bedroom in the future and have the proper structure in place to do so. So if we need to revise the setbacks, I guess we would have to work on that for our next hearing.
For the three buildings along Adams with the zero step entry in the back, and these being townhomes that will be purchased, what if an owner wanted to convert that into a garage? Is that an option that they would have?
I don't believe so. I guess I don't, yeah, I'd probably look a bit more at you than, we wouldn't probably allow that. I guess the HOA probably wouldn't allow that to take place either. We haven't defined those, that master deed bylaws yet.
I think from our standpoint, HOA and master deeds aside, we would look at that as a change to the site plan and bring it back to Planning Commission because it would change the functionality of the street. I'm not sure how the bylaws would be structured to know what that process would be. Typically, if it were coming back before Planning Commission, that we're an individual homeowner at that point, we would also have documentation from the HOA to indicate support. So we don't enforce the bylaws, but we try to make sure that we work with the owner to ensure that there's communication so that all three parties, city, owner, and HOA are involved in that discussion. I think what it would mean, though, is if that that ground floor space were converted into a separate unit, though, that individuals that might reside above would then be required to walk around.
Correct.
And it wouldn't be a zero-step entry for that upper
Correct.
unit, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
If they convert it, would there then be parking requirements with an ADU? Additional?
There would be, yes.
Yeah.
And that would be something else
I
that
think
would have to be.
That's part of the flexibility we're looking for today, is to kind of plan for that potential future with the parking requirements.
So
Right,
they're
because you're, because you're asking for a range of,
And that's why the range
Allowable
is
units, yeah.
being requested.
Yeah.
May I speak to the timeline for when you last engaged the neighbors? I know you've got great resources in here. Have you engaged the neighbors about the change in the park and these additional
Yes.
buildings?
Yep, so we initially engaged the neighbors with the changes that you're seeing here, I believe last April, followed up in the fall, and there was smaller meetings in between then and now, and still ongoing work with the community.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Andrew, I don't know if this would be for you or for your civil, but my understanding from the fire department is that the proposed road would actually need to be 26 feet and not 20 feet to accommodate the fire truck. So I'm not sure that the plans were updated with that information. So I just want to make sure we have that consideration and whether if there are not curbs and the sidewalk is flush with the street, maybe that is a way to accommodate the 26 feet if necessary. But I believe that was a requirement of the fire department because of the fire code changes recently. And then also, since you're up here, I'm wondering, can you help me reconcile the landscape plan and the site plan with the renderings? It certainly, the renderings do show some additional landscaping and placement that are not consistent with the site plan. So I just want to make sure we understand what is the accuracy of the renderings.
Regarding the street width, we have been working with the fire department on that, and I know we did kind of a last minute change around December to revise some of the street width. I couldn't really tell on that screen what it's listed now. I think you were saying it was 20. We have been working on, I think, 28 feet total, but then getting into that parallel parking is something we're still kind of working through with the fire department. So there might be a couple feet here or there adjusting to meet their requirements. As far as landscaping, it kind of ties into that street width discussion, particularly along that interior street. There's not a ton of room to put street trees. We have utilities coming between the buildings, and then we also have the patios attached to the back. So I guess kind of the short answer to that would be that that's still a little bit of a work in progress, depending on what we do with some of the street width discussions and some of these smaller building adjustments, and then obviously putting them in where we can.
Do you have space on the southern edge then? Because I feel like, there's dimensional constraints here, and requirements that have to be met. But what I'm trying to understand is that going to come at the expense of the landscaping along the streetscape elements to reflect, I think, John, you used the European style feel. Can those elements that would create that feel be accommodated with the 26-foot width?
That, I would have to review that. That's kind of why it's a little bit sparse at the moment, because we're
Okay.
still looking into some of that and trying to figure out where we're going to be at
Okay.
width-wise. We would work to comply as much as possible as we can, fitting landscaping in where we can. We want to make this a nice space. We don't want it to just be empty.
Sure. And I understand, I mean, this is a conceptual plan approval for the Planning Commission, so I think that there's still time to work through some of these details. But I think being clear for the Planning Commission on what is the expectation for how this street functions and feels is really important, because what I don't want to have happen is approve a concept plan based on dimensions and layout, and then not be able to add those placemaking elements, and then it's a much more difficult position for you to be in during a final site plan review if you don't have those expectations clearly articulated.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hard to say no.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, I think the more we can do to increase that pedestrian-oriented environment, the better, but, yeah.
And I know Habitat and Amplify have the same intentions. It's just when we're developing in an urban area, we're constrained by geometry, and sometimes that pushes and pulls a few things.
Any other questions now? Okay, well, you have a seat. I will open up the public hearing. If you're here to speak on this case, make your way up to the mic and give us your thoughts. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and turn to my fellow commissioners here.
I generally like the changes. If they can, work with the fire department and the city in a way to make the street narrower, I totally understand the desire to do that, and I kind of like the approach. So I would be in favor of that. I was a little bit concerned about putting the park on Adams Street and Fuller, but after hearing the explanations around it and the comparison to Cherry Street, that makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I would be in favor of it.
I struggled with the park too, and I'm glad that you're able to bring some clarity to that, because I did think being able to make this a neighborhood park is important. I don't love how the phasing makes the park number 7. So I did, 7 out of 7. I wish that the park were completed, when the first batch of residential units was completed. I understand there may be some challenges, and I don't know that I have any control over that, but I did reach out to staff just because I wanted to make sure that this important element didn't get overlooked and that the park actually got finished, and they did clarify that this is, a part of the approval. I almost feel like it should be a condition of, the final C of O, but there is an approval in the township the city, that's going to be an adjustment, that this element will get finished, and that was important to me. And I do appreciate the work that Amplify has done to build relationships, and the other organizations involved, to build relationships and get feedback from the community over years on this project. It hasn't been just shoved down anybody's throat, and I like that we actually have community feedback. That's super important to me, but I also agree that this meets some of the goals that the city has for density. I did want to ask parking requirements. What percentage does the Planning Commission have the authority to waive?
So Planning Commission can waive up to 100% of the required parking. I would need to rely on staff to help me remember what were the expectations around the original planned redevelopment district here. But you have the authority. However, those spaces have to be, the waivers have to be earned. And they can be earned through availability of on-street parking, keeping in mind the comments that were made previously from Mobile GR. They can be earned by proximity to transit, the add of bike parking. So there is that authority.
Okay, one more question for staff then. This may not be readily available, but do we have other examples of projects, mixed-use projects or housing projects that have waived parking requirements, and there has been problems or there haven't been problems that would give us any more insight onto if that would be appropriate for this site?
So Planning Commission has fairly consistently, I'd say, waived parking requirements at varying degrees I can't think of a similarly situated project. I'm staring very intently at Elizabeth, I'm sorry. I can't think of a similarly situated project to compare a waiver of a townhome style development. I think ours are more in the modern era, mid-century era. But the waivers of parking generally, especially in our traditional neighborhoods, are not infrequent. Again, they're earned though, so the expectation is that if private parking isn't provided, that the individual might choose a different mode of transportation, and that's easily accessible. I do want to circle back on the phasing piece of it, though. I do think it would be within your authority to, let me finish my thought. I do think it would be within your authority to consider whether the proposed phasing plan is acceptable to you. The phasing of the overall PRD is something that the Planning Commission did consider. So whether there's tied to funding and such, I think that that's something that Amplify specifically might be in a better position to address. So if you need more information to feel comfortable with the phasing plan, I think that that's a fair question to be asking, and know that if it is an expectation that it has to be moved earlier in the process to align with the development of the townhomes, for example, that's something that you could consider. But John's hand shut up really quickly, so I don't know if you'd like.
Could we pull up the phasing plan again? I don't remember which direction that was at. The way that we've envisioned the phasing is that it really just kind of flows south to north, but that wasn't necessarily the way that we thought it was going to end up. It's just as these partnerships and kind of financing pathways emerge, that we'd probably reorder the phasing if this happens. So the other thing I think is a really important context is that the PRD is connected with the community partnership agreement, and I failed to mention that early. And so the community partnership agreement really lays out the expectations of Amplify GR, the neighborhood organizations, and the city of Grand Rapids. And one of the key features of this is that through this partnership approach, it's going to take a village to get these things accomplished, and the parks are certainly going to be one of those things that will require some ongoing conversations. And so we are in active conversations on the park across the street at the Adams Apartments complex. We're in active conversations with the current Modern Hardware property about their hopes to move across the street to become a future park, and then of course this one. And so I think one of the conversations we're having with the city is, does this become more of a City of Grand Rapids Parks distributed type of model? And so I think at this phase we're not able to commit to it tied to this, but I think it would be appropriate to tie it to something prior to being at the very, very last thing. So I think that would be appropriate. So again, our expectation is that these numbers are going to change, but we also have to continue our conversations and negotiations with the City Parks Department about how to fulfill all these green space desires.
Which currently before the Planning Commission, though, it's not, the city has not committed to this being a public park.
Currently, yep.
Yeah, so just want to make sure that that's, for the record, clear with the Planning Commission.
Is the playground in Phase 2 publicly available, or is that tied to a daycare?
That is tied to the LIHTC units there.
Okay.
And so it will be technically available, or, well, I should say the opposite. Technically not available, but practically will, and functionally will be available for local residents as well.
Okay.
So I think that's an important part too, is not only the future park that's in the white box at the very bottom, but we will have a community garden and the playground that's nested within the kind of the Peach Phase 2 that's under construction currently.
What is the current setback from the Adams-facing buildings? You said 10 would be required for the egress windows? And what are we at right now, do we know? 8, okay. Manageable.
I'm sorry, John, when you're talking about in Kyle, when you're talking about the current playground, are you talking about the one like by the Refugee Education Center and right by the hub?
No, it's next, so the number 2, I don't know if my cursor shows.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. What about the one that is by the hub, that playground there? Is that available to?
That one is exclusively for the Early Learning Center.
Okay.
Yep. The other one that we're kind of more informally working on is the property that Hub 07 owns between the sidewalk to the north and the Modern Hardware building. There's probably about 20 feet of green space there. And so we're also looking in the interim of more of kind of a temporary organic kind of park there, similar to the Boston Square Parklet we have immediately to the west of Modern Hardware. So again, we're trying to inject more kind of informal green spaces in addition to the formal ones that are currently there.
I guess as it relates to parking, typically I have no problem waiving parking, but as these are going to be owner-occupied units and clearly intended for families that could have 2 working adults that work in areas that may not have good transit accessibility, I just have a concern that if we're only providing 1 parking spot per unit, you know, you have 2 adults who are working. What if, you know, 1 adult works in Rockford, 1 adult works in Cedar Springs? You clearly can't get there using transit. Now, that being said, I also understand that, you know, people who have that requirement have the option not to purchase these units. But I do just worry that it limits, and for, I mean, and I'll say for me personally, I'm not counting on the parking spots on Adams to exist forever if we're thinking that that's going to become a bikeway in the future. So that's a concern that I have.
I'm with you on this, and I'm certainly being influenced by a day like today when it is a privilege to drive into a garage and to drive out of a garage and not have to manage traversing any distance, especially if you have a young family or a child in a car seat. So I'm wondering if there's a blended approach that's an option where some of the units could have garages and some could have that ability to further develop that lower level, and then families might have options about what their priority is. I don't know if that's our purview or not, but it's been a thought I've had.
I would say it is within your purview. I think that if that were the majority of the Planning Commission sentiment, that a pause or postponement would be a better route for us to work with the applicant, determine, you know, feasibility of that from a project perspective, project financing model, and then from our perspective about how the site would function if we were to have garages off the service drive. Yeah, it'd be something I'd hesitate if, I'm fine if that's what the Planning Commission wants. I'd be a little bit hesitant to move forward with an approval today with a condition like that.
I want to clarify my comment too, that I'm not necessarily looking to add back the garages. I just worry that having less than 2 parking spots per unit is not ideal.
Would be okay if I respond? So just conferred with Andrew. You know, I think really our approach is, I want to kind of center who this is for specifically. So this is a project in partnership with Amplify and Habitat for Humanity. So these are really, you know, projects that are focusing on low and moderate income folks that have traditionally been locked out of homeownership opportunities. And so I think it's really important to, you know, to build garages and that sort of thing is at a tremendous expense, and it's an expense that's at the detriment of creating the living spaces that we're desiring to get. And so I just want to make sure that we're holding those 2 things in balance. You I think probably part of, I think what you mentioned as well is that there is a choice too, that there is going to be an element of self-selection here. If, parking is a desire, right, this may, or abundant parking is a desire, this probably is not the place that you're going to want to live. And so I think that's going to be a choice. There certainly is an abundance of other choices in the city of Grand Rapids. And so I think, I think who is the core market of the 22 families that will be living here? This is not for everybody, absolutely. Some people want a single family house. Other people want a garage, right? But this will be for a demographic of folks that are looking for something like this. And I think I'd probably just keep that in mind as well. Is there anything else you want to kind of share on that?
Yeah, I think on top of that, we think about the overall PRD and what the intention of the overall development is. This feels like it is in line with what that intention is, to promote walkability and having access to every aspect of your daily life without having to get in a car. And if people do really prioritize that, we have other projects that are going to meet those needs elsewhere. So we also really value housing choice and providing a different mix of options for this segment of the market that has traditionally been left out of homeownership. Yeah, there are also two bus routes, I believe one that runs along Kalamazoo and one that runs along Fuller. So there is ample transit access on either side of the development.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I, for one, am pleased to see the addition of living space and the inclusion of zero-step entry units. The additional density is good, in my opinion, and very small if someone was concerned about adding density. With the Adams Street, after hearing from Mobile GR and the uncertainty related to sticking with that original bicycle action plan and not knowing what's going to happen there, I think with that there's enough time for the city to work with this development to figure out what is best for Adams in the future. And yeah, I thought immediately of the Cherry Park example when we were talking about, when I saw the plan to move it here, and how that is a very busy intersection, and yet that park feels very comfortable to be in. So I think that this can work here as well. And yeah, just glad for the continued engagement with the community and noticing the modifications that were made between meeting 1 and meeting 2. So yeah, thanks for listening to folks about this development. I'm in support.
Assuming that the fire lane width requirements can be met, good. I am concerned about the experience of the residents in building T4 and T5, and I'm fine with a narrower street, but not having any landscaping or the tree lawn or anything, just having the road flow into the sidewalk is concerning to me. And I understand that they're working with some pretty tight constraints here. But it does feel like some of the homes that face alleys right now in the city, and I worry about how that actually turns out in the future for them. Front door facing the back door of a neighbor pretty close by, and what that's like. I think it would be better if there was more distance there so that there could be at least some buffer from car traffic from parking.
Could we recommend or require that in a motion to approve? I want to make sure
So I would say yes, if you might need to give me a hot minute to come up with that condition. But yes, if the goal is to find space to ensure that the entrances to the townhomes, both the T2, 3, 5, and 4 especially, have additional landscaping to provide either that sense of separation between the sidewalk and the street, then we can work with the applicant on the site design, the dimensions. You know, the further we push T4 and T5, you know, there's obviously the grade behind it. But we can definitely work with the applicant if that's important to the Planning Commission, which I don't disagree at all with. I think it's doable. I just think having that clearly defined, or that expectation clearly defined in a condition, is critical for us to make sure that we're prepared when we come back for final site plan approval. Alternatively, if you feel like that is a significant enough concern or condition that needs to be addressed before conceptual approval, we can also, you know, come back to you. I think those are your two options.
There was one slide in the presentation that shows the view of the back of Adams Townhomes from the southeast, if we could pull that up. So looking at this makes me less concerned about it, because while there isn't a room for street trees and the parkway, there's clearly thought being put into creating that separation with these vegetation boxes and kind of other things that can be accommodated in the space that they're working with.
I agree, except that I don't know that these renderings were created based on a 26-foot wide street. And the renderings are not consistent with the civil plans that are submitted.
Okay.
And those porches and boxes are on the Adams side, not on the internal townhomes, right?
The lower left image, the rendering, the
Right.
right side of that is fronting on the internal drive.
Okay. That's the
I'll go up to
the new zero entry. Are you sure? Because that looks like more than two buildings.
Yes, so the lower left picture, the right side are the three buildings that would front Adams Street.
Adams.
Yes.
Right.
So the
These are
boxes you
internal,
see
yes.
are the back entrance of
Adams.
the Adams Street townhomes. And then
Gotcha.
That's what I
on the
thought.
left side of that picture are the two buildings that would front the private street.
Okay.
Just something to consider as we're discussing this. The two buildings that front the interior street are proposed to be ADA accessible. So we do need every inch of what we've proposed in the floor plan to allow for mobility within the unit and accessibility to the bathroom and the bedroom on the first
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah, and I have no interest in preventing that, because I like it in concept, but with a zero entry living space, I'm even more concerned about how it interacts with the sidewalk and the street, because there's no grade change and it feels very public.
Yeah.
Right? It's difficult to interact with the street without people looking directly into whatever room that is. So all the more reason why it would be better to have a bit more separation. But again, I understand that there are constraints here with the lots, and
Yeah.
I'm just raising that as a pretty major concern of mine, and how people who actually live here will experience that.
I agree with that, Kyle. And I also agree that it's kind of difficult, because with Kristen, that it's kind of difficult to look at this rendering and reconcile it with the civil plans, especially because we have a question about how wide the drive has to be from the fire department perspective, and the fact that these renderings show cars parking on the south side of that driveway, which is not something that's on the civil plan.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's up to y'all what kind of motion you make here today. I'm comfortable with the fact that we have all emphasized the importance of landscaping and placemaking, and that also is a goal and priority of the development group and the city. and I trust that there will be, I mean, the fire department has to sign off on this, right? So like, there are parameters in place, and they'll be coming back for final site plan review. So I wouldn't love to postpone this or anything.
No, but final site plan review is a check with further detail of your preliminary review. So it becomes a much more narrow scope of review unless you have conditions or expectations clearly articulated in your motion.
Conceptually, I'm okay with this, and for the use, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the increase in density. I'm okay with the waiver of parking. But when it comes to the site plan review, I would want to see something different. And so I think we can approve it with some of those expectations when they come back for final, right? Or is that not something the city's comfortable with?
No, I'm fine with that. I think that there's definitely, it appears to be like a workable solution. I just would appreciate a short recess for me to craft that condition for you. I'm just struggling with it on the fly here. And so if that is a condition that we want to add because you're inclined to move forward with an approval, I would just appreciate a couple of minutes to work with my team to develop that properly.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, I agree with Kyle. I mean, that's where my head's at.
Let's take a 5-minute break then, and we'll come back.
Thank you.
before we get there, I'm wondering if y'all have worked with or consulted with disability advocates about this project. Could you talk about that engagement?
Yes, we did have a preliminary meeting with disability advocates, primarily around the the floor plans of the units and the internal design. I think we'd be happy to go back to them in the interim between full recommendation to get some feedback on the overall site design. That's fine.
Okay, so in light of the conversation that took place about the streetscape elements along the internal drive, we came up with the condition for your consideration that additional streetscape elements along the internal drive be added to create appropriate physical separation, enhancing pedestrian safety and resident livability, and more closely align with vital street standards to the extent practicable. So the Vital Streets reference was added because it does have a lot of guidelines in there that can be at least used to help guide some of the direction we can provide. But understanding that to the extent practicable gives us the ability to consider the overarching desire of what the Planning Commission has talked about, the dimensional constraints of the site. So that's where we landed.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Kyle, do you think that's sufficiently?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
I do. I just understand the difficulty of making this work physically.
Yep.
But I think that covers it, and then I look forward to seeing what comes back for final site plan review.
I think planning staff shares some of the sentiment that have been expressed today, which is some of the language that Laura used in the summary to talk about the function of that service or the internal drive, sorry, not service drive, and trying to raise some of those issues for your consideration. And it sounds like you're in agreement that what we're seeing today might not quite be sufficient. And so I think we're comfortable with having the language that we've added here, understanding the direction that you would like this to go in, so we can continue working together with the applicant.
Excellent. Would anyone like to make a motion or anything else we need to discuss?
I did, before the motion, sorry, were you going to make a
No,
motion?
go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Just also, the egress window well piece of it, I did have a condition for that as well.
Okay.
So I just wanted to state that before I threw it at you during the moment,
Love it.
just to make sure that that requirement is met.
Well, would it be okay if I just let you read that part when we get to it?
100%.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the request of Amplified GR John Ipple of a major amendment to the PRD for 22 to 25 townhome units in 5 buildings, a waiver of the required number of parking spaces with 23 parking spaces provided, a relocation of the play area to the northeast corner of the property, and associated site plan changes at 1150 Adams Street Southeast for the following reasons. 3A and B, the mix of uses and density of the development and design of the proposed PRD are consistent with the master plan and the proposed purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, because the Great Neighborhoods chapter of the 2024 Community Master Plan recommends a greater variety of housing types that enhance the general scale, character, and natural features of the neighborhood. Development of additional townhomes will increase availability of more affordable housing types and will support vibrant, walkable neighborhoods while gently increasing density. 3D, the proposed PRD amendment will ensure sufficient development on the property and will result in a logical and orderly development pattern in the neighborhood, because the additional townhome buildings and units and associated site changes will result in a cohesive site development and circulation pattern. The site placement of the new townhome building is intended to take advantage of the existing grade changes and to echo traditional design patterns. The townhomes facing Adams Street are consistent with the development and patterns of the neighborhood and have been sensitively designed to respect neighborhood character. Number 2 is site plan review. The proposed use will meet the site plan review standards of section 5.12.08.e because all elements of the design are harmoniously and efficiently organized in relation to topography, character of the neighborhood and adjoining property, and the type, size, and proportions of the buildings. All buildings will be arranged so as to permit access for emergency vehicles by practicable means. And the widths of the streets and driveways will be appropriate for the existing and anticipated volume of traffic. Neighborhood 4A, the proposed developments will be compatible, harmonious, and appropriate with the existing or planned character and uses of the neighborhood, adjacent properties, and the natural environment because the townhome building style, height, and exterior materials will be compatible with the existing homes in the surrounding neighborhood. 4B, potentially adverse effects arising from the proposed development on the neighborhood and adjacent properties will be minimized through appropriate orientation of townhome buildings and entrances fronting both Adams Street and the internal drive, and adequate on-site parking provided on the private drive, Adams Street, and the proximity of public transit. 4C, the proposed development will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to existing or future adjacent uses or to the public welfare by reason of excessive traffic, noise, or visual clutter because the several access points in the development will disperse vehicular traffic associated with the townhomes, and the site is well served by public transit, reducing the need for personal vehicles. 4D, pedestrian and vehicular connections will be provided between buildings, uses, and amenities within the property, as well as connections to and from the surrounding properties because internal street and sidewalk connections are provided, linking the site internally as well as to the surrounding neighborhood. And the future play area located at the corner of the property will be accessible to both residents of the PRD and the surrounding neighborhood. The environment 5A, the proposed development will retain as many natural features of the landscape as practicable because the site has been disturbed over the years with few original features, and the minimum required green space of 20% will be provided. Public facilities 6A, adequate public or private infrastructure and services will be provided at no additional public cost and will safeguard the health, safety, and general welfare of the public because the applicant will be responsible for the construction of any new infrastructure necessary for the development. 6B, the proposed development will not be detrimental to the financial stability and economic welfare of the city because the additional housing units will increase the customer base for the commercial uses within the PRD and for nearby businesses. 6C, wherever practicable, the proposed development will provide amenities, including but not limited to park and recreational facilities, urban open space, and non-vehicular connections that serve a public purpose because the future play area will provide green space and a recreational area available to residents of the development and the surrounding area. Be it further resolved that the following conditions of approval shall apply to this project. The standard set condition A approvals. Striking number 5, that any expansion of the approved special land use requires an additional special land use review and approval by the Planning Commission. And 7, that the approval shall take effect 16 days after the date of the Planning Commission's decision. Number 2, this approval shall be subject to all conditions of the original PRD approval except as modified below. 3, that the elevations of the townhome buildings shall be subject to the Planning Commission final site plan review. And 4, Kristen?
4 is that that additional streetscape elements along the internal drive be added to create appropriate physical separation, enhancing pedestrian safety and resident livability, and more closely align with the vital street standards to the extent practicable. 5, that required setbacks for egress window wells be met along Adams.
And then 6, that this approval shall take effect upon city commission approval.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, guys. Okay, we are now moving on to, let's get Commissioner Yonker back in here, shall we?
Andrew, maybe we could meet to debrief with your team and our team just to kind of go over next steps.
Right, thanks. Okay, one item of other business is an extension request for 740 and 742 Clancy Avenue Northeast.
So on January 23rd, 2024, the Planning Commission granted approval for construction of a new two-family dwelling in the TNLDR zone district at I've lost the address.
740 and 742 Clancy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The effective date of the approval was February 8, 2025, and a 6-month extension of this approval is now being requested. The zoning ordinance allows the Planning Commission to grant up to 2 6-month extensions if the commission finds that the extension is warranted due to circumstances beyond the control of the applicant. And there is a letter in your packet from the applicant describing the situation that they have found themselves in over this past year and their request. And if granting a 6-month extension would give the applicant until August 7, 2026 to substantially commence work on the project.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, it seems like this request is consistent with other requests we've gotten and pretty straightforward. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will move that the project is given an extension.
Support.
All right, I have motion support. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Planning Commission discussion. Anything here? No? Okay. I will open up public comment. If you'd like to speak during public comment, feel free to make your way to the mic. Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. And we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.